Corticon is a favorite for most users because it's so easy to use. It's also easy to deploy and get up and running. Today we are going to show you how to get Corticon up and going in Docker. Now, normally we would just assume that you already have Docker running somewhere, but for this video we are going to show you how to install Docker as well. If you don't need that, you can skip ahead. For this exercise, we will use AWS, but you're free to use whichever platform you prefer, including running Linux on your own PC. The steps are basically the same for all versions of Linux, but today we will use Debian. Once you log into your AWS account, the first thing you need to do is set up an Rsa Key pair. Of course, if you're using your own instance of Linux, or using another cloud vendor like Azure, you don't need to take this step. To create the key pair, we need to go to the EC2 page within AWS. Then select Key Pairs. In the top right corner, select Create Key Pair. Give your key pair a name. In this case, we will call it Docker. We will be using Putty to make the connection to our instance of Linux, so we need to make sure we select ppk as the file type to make things easy. But if you are using another terminal application like OpenSSH, then you should select a PEM file instead. We then select Create Key Pair on this page and select a location to save the ppk file because we will need that later. Now that we have our key pair, we are ready to start setting up our instance of Linux. Go back to the EC2 dashboard, and now we can start setting up our machine. Select Launch Instance. In this case, we are using Debian because that's what I am most familiar with, but by all means, feel free to choose a flavor of Linux that you're more comfortable with. Just remember that the instructions may differ slightly, that's all. In the search bar, type Debian. For this exercise, we will select the top option. We are using the free tier for this demonstration. But make sure to consult your sizing guidelines for the application that you intend to deploy. In any case, it doesn't matter too much because one of the great things about cloud architecture is if we make a mistake, we can change the size of our server later on. We will use the default options for this exercise. So we don't need to see all the options. We simply just select Review and Launch. Then after checking that everything is as it should be, select Launch to start the build process. Make sure you select the key pair we created earlier and also acknowledge by ticking the box. And then select Launch. After a few minutes your machine will be built and then shortly after that it should start. When you're ready, select View Instance. This will open up the instance dashboard page. You can tell if your machine is up and running because it says running under instance state. You can also see that under checks, it states 2 out of 2 checks passed. In the top row of the screen, locate the Connect button and select it. This will open up the Credentials tab and tell you all you need to know in order to connect to our server. The great thing about Linux on AWS is you don't need to know the password of a server, because it uses a secured key file. So to connect to the server, we now need to get Putty all set up. First, we open Putty, then in the menu on the left side of the screen, locate the tab called Off. Then select the Browse button to open the key file we set up earlier. Once you have done that, copy the public DNS name for our server from the Connect tab on the AWS website. You can use the little copy icon to make sure you copy it properly. Make sure you save your settings so you can use them again in the future. A certificate warning message will appear. Just accept the certificate, and it will never bother you again. And that's it. You're now connected to the server. All you need to do now is log in. And for that, we need a username. Each version of Linux in AWS has a different username. But fortunately, they make it easy to find. On the Connect tab, there is a line of text labeled Example. It starts with something like SSH-I. You will see the username as part of that line of text. Just copy that and paste it into the terminal. And that's all you need. Now we have our server set up, it's time to install Docker. There are a lot of commands to install Docker, but it's pretty straightforward. Refer to the instructions that accompany this video for details. Or just search Install Docker on Debian or whatever flavor of Linux you're using. You should find a web page on the Docker website that looks similar to this one. I should point out something here. If you're following along, you will notice that I've sped parts of the video up. That's just to make the pacing a little better for the video. I'm sure you can understand. It's a little boring otherwise. The first command we issue is to make sure there aren't any old versions of Docker, even though we are pretty sure there isn't. It's good practice to do anyway. You should expect to see something similar to the error on the screen if there isn't already Docker installed. The next command we need to send to the machine is sudo apt get update. Now we need to issue the install command. Next, issue the curl command to update the GPK key. Now we copy the stable repo onto our local machine. Once again we need to issue the sudo update command. Now the moment we have all been waiting for. It's time to actually install Docker. Okay. Great. We're done. Let's test our Docker install by running the Hello World Docker app. If Docker is installed correctly, you should see the message hello from Docker on the screen. The next part of the tutorial is purely optional. Please note that the commands you will enter now will grant root level privileges to Docker. So don't do this if you're concerned about security. Only do this if you don't want to use the sudo command to launch Docker. The first command is sudo group add docker. Next, the sudo usermod command to add the Docker user to the Docker group. Now activate the changes. Finally, run the hello world command again. And note that, you should again see the hello world message. Only this time you don't need sudo. Next we will make sure that Docker starts on boot. We need to issue these two commands to set the system controls the way we want them. That's it. Next, we'll install the Corticon Docker image, but first, we need to make some changes to our AWS setup. This is to enable us to access the Corticon server on port 8080. To do this, open EC2 again, then select the instance of Debian that we have been working with. Select the Security tab, then the Security Group's URL. Edit inbound rules. Add rule. Set the port to 8080. And then set the source to anywhere IPv4. Then press Save Rule. That's it. We are now ready to install Corticon for Docker on our machine. The first step to install our container is to download the container files. These can be obtained from the Progress Software website or by contacting your local Progress Software sales representative. Once they are downloaded, you need to copy them to your Linux machine. To copy the files we will use a product called Winscp, but for all intents and purposes this is just an FTP tool. You can use whatever you're most comfortable with. One of the reasons I like Winscp is it's possible to import saved sessions from Putty, which just makes things that little bit easier. Given we have already created a saved Putty session, we will just import that into Winscp. To import the Putty sessions into Winscp, open the Session Manager by selecting Sessions, then select New Session. From here you can choose to enter the server information in manually, however keep in mind that as AWS used a pre-shared key, you will also need to add the key to Winscp, and by importing the Putty connection this is taken care of. In the Tools menu select Import Sites. You will then be presented with a list of saved sites from Putty. Select the appropriate one, which in this case is called Corticon. Once you have imported the site, you can hit Login and you will be able to log in with the username admin. Once you're logged in you should be in the home admin directory. Create a new directory in the home directory called Corticon by selecting the new icon in the toolbar. Now on the left side of the screen navigate to the location where you have saved the contents of the Corticon Docker image zip file. Select all the files and drag them across to the right side of the screen onto the Corticon directory. If you have done it correctly, the dialog box will appear to show that the files are being copied. To confirm that everything has copied correctly, on the right side of the screen open up the Corticon directory. You should see the same as on the left side. Now we need to log into our Debian server using Putty. Once logged in, we need to navigate to the directory that contains our Docker image by navigating to the Corticon directory, using the command cd/admin/Corticon. From there, we need to build our Docker image. To do that we issue the command docker build t corticon space dot. The build is now complete. So all we have to do now is start the Docker session. So we send the command docker run p8080 to 8080 restart unless stopped Corticon. After a few minutes, you will see on the screen Catalina start server startup. This tells you that the decision service is now running. We can confirm this by browsing to the Corticon decision service landing page. using either the server DNS or IP address, as well as port 8080. Once the login screen appears, use the default username and password, admin to log in. Now we need to set up a decision server. This is a container within a container if you like, and the decision service that is consumed by your application is hosted on the decision server. This is also how we license the server. To begin, from the dashboard, select Manage Servers. From the Manage Server page, select the New Server icon in the top right corner. Next, choose the option that is appropriate for your instance. In our example, we are only adding a single Corticon server. Give the server a name and provide a brief description of how the server will be used. For example, in this case, the name is my first Corticon server, and the description is this is a sample server running in Docker. In the IP address field, put the IP address of the actual server. You can find this on the instance information page that we talked about earlier when we discussed connecting via SSH. The port needs to be a port that we have already opened. In this case, the port is 8080, and you can select the Server Requires Authentication option if desired. Once you're ready, hit Save. The server will attempt to start. If successful, you should see a page similar to this one. Note the green tick in the status column. Now we need to apply the license file to the server. To do this, we need to go back into the server and edit the settings. Select the server name, in this case, my first Corticon server. This will open up the server statistics page. In the top right-hand corner of the server statistics page, select Edit. You will then be presented with the server edit page. In the bottom right half of the page, you will see where it says License File. Select Choose File, and a file browser will open. Select the license file as provided by your Progress sales representative. The file should be named something like cc license.jar. Once loaded, hit Save. That's it. The Corticon server is all up and running. To confirm, browse to the same URL as the Corticon server, with the extension access/swagger/ and you will see the Swagger UI page. To connect the Corticon Studio to the server, open the Studio, select Project, Package and Deploy Service. On the form, enter the URL to the server, with the extension access as shown on the screen. If you set up authentication, enter the username and password and hit Test. If you see a success message, you're good to go. Thank you for watching. Until next time. Goodbye.